of the Cabinet, which will be held as a hybrid meeting. The open part of the meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting either from the Council chamber or from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their microphones and, where remote, their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure that connection remains as stable as possible. Whether in the chamber or accessing the meeting remotely, if any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order that I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. Chat button has been disabled for this meeting, as it is for all meetings. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite you to speak during the course of the meeting. Officers too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use, please. We will now proceed to the agenda business, and the first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence from members. All members of the Cabinet are present, but we have had apologies from the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support, and I would like to welcome the Head of Service, Nicola Achanis, to the meeting in his stead. If there are no other apologies for absence, I do not think there are, we will move on to declarations of interest. So if there are any of a personal or prejudicial interest in accordance with the provision of the Members' Code of Conduct adopted by the Council from September 2008, please can you indicate now? I can see that Councillor Farr wants to come in. Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader. Declare an interest on item number 10, please. Would that be personal? Prejudicial. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farr. Are there any other declarations of interest? I can't see any. Of course, if you do identify any during the course of the meeting, please indicate, and I will take them at that point. We have next on the agenda the minutes of the last meeting of Cabinet, which is held on the 20th of June 2023. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, as a true and accurate record of that meeting?
Move, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Farr.
Second that, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Spanzik. Is everyone in agreement? Aye. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now receive the first report on today's agenda, and that is a report of the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and that is on our budget monitoring for 2023 to 2024 and the Q1 revenue forecast. Caris, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. So the purpose of this report this afternoon is to provide you with an update on the Council's revenue financial position as at the 30th of June this year, and also to seek approval for environments over £100,000, which require approval by Cabinet as required by the Council's financial procedure rules. So the approved revenue budget for this financial year is £342 million. The Council's net revenue budget and the projected outturn for the current financial year is shown for you in Table 1 of this afternoon's report. The table outlines a projected position at the end of June, which is a net overspend of £9.7 million, which is made up of a net overspend on directorate budgets of £12.7 million and a net underspend of £3 million on our council-wide budgets. The key financial pressures are in Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate and Home to School Transport, with each of these services projecting an £11 million and a £1.3 million overspend respectively. Work is now ongoing to identify a long-term financial plan to support the required service changes in Social Services, Children's Services. It's too early in the financial year to provide a realistic indication of projected council tax income for this year, and whether or not the council is likely to see a reduction in its income from council tax as more people have experienced financial hardship due to the current cost of living crisis, or whether the additional income which should be collected through the introduction of the council tax premiums on empty properties will impact. This will obviously be very closely monitored throughout the remainder of this year. There have been some budget variants and technical adjustments between the budgets since the medium-term financial strategy was approved by Council in February, and these are set out for you in paragraph 317 of this afternoon's report. The largest adjustments have been in relation to increased energy costs and the increased cost of the national living wage and the real living wage. The pressure of inflation remains significant within this year's budget, and it will be monitored closely now for the remainder of the year. You'll see in the report that there are some approved savings brought forward from previous years, which are still to be found, and these are detailed for you at Table 2. Directorates have been asked to continue to seek to make these savings requirements and to take any mitigating actions that they can to ensure that these savings are achieved. When this year's budget was agreed, it included a reduction in the budget of £2.6 million. It is currently projected that there will be a shortfall of £200,000 against this at the year end. Appendix 2 details the progress against each of these agreed savings and the action being taken by directorates to mitigate any shortfall. This afternoon's report provides significant detail with regard to the financial position across the authority, with the financial summary being provided at Appendix 3 and details in the report starting at Section 3.3. I would also bring members' attention to the work that is ongoing now with regard to reviewing the earmarked reserves that the Council has and is referred to at paragraph 336 of this afternoon's report. If I may, Leader, I would just take you to Section 9 of the report and the recommendations that Cabinet note the projected revenue position for the current financial year, and also that Cabinet approve the environments over £100,000 as outlined in paragraph 317 of this afternoon's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Caris. I will bring in Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Leader, and can I thank Caris for presenting the report. There are clearly some significant overspends in this Q1 that we will need to deal with and address. And I think it's important that we say now that we're going to have a forensic assessment of the pressures to understand the full impact across the authority for that. And I welcome the opportunity for the mid-term briefing that has been scheduled now for Friday of this week. And I certainly know it's an opportunity for members to engage and support the Council through a very challenging time. I was fortunate enough to be with a Finance Cabinet members network meeting last week. And, it's, I suppose, little comfort, but it is somewhat reassuring that these pressures are found across Wales, and that this is a national problem that we need to address. back to the report, the vehements, I'm quite happy to support the vehements because these are planned. It was now our intention to hold these sums centrally until greater understanding of the pressures for the real living wage and others were known, and then we can via that money then to the service areas. So happy to support the report and the recommendation. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. I can see that Councillor Farr would like to come in. Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader, and I'd like to second the report and say thank you to Carys for a very, very comprehensive report. Took me ages to read and absorb, so thank you very much. I do have some questions, Leader. I've got 5 questions aimed at Carys as well as Claire, so I don't know if you want to ask them all together or one by one.
Only 5 questions? Yeah, no. Perhaps if you could ask them, because if some of them are on similar topics, and that would be helpful, I think, to the officers to answer those questions. Thank you, Councillor Farr.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So, direct payment. I'm just wondering, by having direct payment, having more money in the direct payment pot, will that reduce our our demand on the home care package? That's one. Do families in Bridgend have duplicate packages, that's direct payment and home care package? If so, why? Where do we record income coming in, contribution from the residents and contribution from the health towards these package of cares? Do we claim back direct payments that hasn't been used by the residents? In the report, we seem to have some overspend in some element regarding staffing and underspent in other part of the report regarding staffing. Do that balance out each other? Those are the questions. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farr. I don't know who wants to go first. The Chief Officer of Finance, Performance and Change. Carys, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for your questions, Councillor Farr. I'll take the financial ones, and then I'm sure my colleague, the Director of Social Services, will step in on some of the service-related ones. So in relation to how do we record the income, it is shown what you're seeing here is a net figure with regards to direct payments. So any income that's coming is netted off that and shown separately in the accounts. You asked whether or not we claim back any direct payments money that hasn't been used. Yes, we do. A team working within my service audits people's direct payment accounts. And if there is money in there that hasn't been utilised, then that money is brought back into the council. So we pull back any money that's underspent. And I know we're doing work with the social care colleagues now to make sure that when those packages go in, they do reflect the level of need, and then the money follows that need. And we continue to work together as people's needs change. But there are circumstances where they haven't spent all of the direct payments monies, and we will reclaim that money back. And then you asked about some narrative in the report that refers to underspends because of staffing vacancies, but also overspends because of agency costs possibly. We do net all of that out across the service. So when you see the figure for social services, for instance, that will be a net figure, and there will be some underspends in some teams for staffing, whereas other teams may well be overspending for various reasons. And the figure that you see is the net figure across the service.
Thank you for that, Carys, and I'll bring in the Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing.
Thank you very much for the questions, Councillor Farr. Just to take them in turn, in terms of direct payments and the impact on home care. So as you will know, under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, we assess people's needs, and we've got a duty then to support the meeting of eligible needs for care and support. We've also got a statutory duty to promote the use of direct payments to meet those eligible needs, and we do that, and we've got quite a high uptake of direct payments here in Bridgend. Direct payments are positive in that they give both the individual and family more choice and control over their own care, but also positive from a budgetary perspective in that they have got a lower unit cost than a commissioned domiciliary care package or indeed providing that service from the in-house service. So it should reduce the overall care and support that we commission independently. And as Cabinet know, in the last year, there's been quite a challenge, hasn't there, in meeting people's needs for care and support in a timely way. And so one of the things that the services have been doing is where there's an assessed need for personal care that could be met through a commissioned service is actually to actively explore with individuals and their families whether a direct payment would be a way that we could meet that need alternatively. And we've seen more and more people taking up direct payments as a result of that. In terms of duplicate packages, obviously you wouldn't duplicate if you're meeting a personal care need through a direct payment. You wouldn't then have a commissioned care and support service going into that same individual's home to do the same thing. What you might have is a mixed package. So you might have an individual who requires, say, four domiciliary calls a day. They may have somebody that is connected to them that they employ as a direct payment carer who's able to do that perhaps twice a day, and they may have a commissioned service coming in for the other 2 calls a day. Under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, we've got a duty to assess a range of needs, including the ability of people to meet their social outcomes and access to the community. You may have a direct payment carer who supports somebody to access the community, be it going to their local church, be it going to play pool in the local pub. You know, every individual is different, so you may find a mixed package in that regard, but it wouldn't duplicate. I think Caris has probably answered the other ones. The only sort of addition I would have in respect of staffing is I think the issue that we've rehearsed previously in terms of the vacancy levels in social services and wellbeing, because of the statutory nature of the work. Those vacancies do need to be covered in order to make sure that we're safeguarding individuals. Particularly, we talk a lot about children's social work positions in that regard, and so that's why there's an overspent position, even though there's some underspents on the permanent vacancy budgets. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Claire, does that answer all your questions?
Yeah, that's really good. Claire just highlighted the overspends because of the agency staff and the underspent because we got vacancies. That's really great. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farr. Next we have Councillor Spanzik, please.
Thank you, Leader. Just to say a few words, because I can't sit here today and just note this report without expressing my severe concern, worry, whatever you want to call it, on the impact authority where we're heading with this projection. It is a projection. Hopefully things will get better. But my worry at the moment is that the negative impact this could have on other directorates such as communities, which in turn has an impact on our communities and the streets and the visible services out there. So it would be wrong of me not to express that concern, and I would ask that every single officer from the top to the bottom, but definitely in social services, think twice every time they spend a penny. I know, and the deputy is coming next to say there are services you have to provide, and we do have to provide lots of services, but there's choices sometimes on what that service consists of and how much is spent. And I will ask every officer working in authority to think twice when they're spending something. Can they do something slightly cheaper? Because we've got a massive hill to climb to claw this back. Otherwise, we're going to be not looking great out there in our streets and our communities.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik. And next we've got the Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Councillor Spanzik, first and foremost, yes, I would defend social services as you would expect me to be, but actually, as all members of council, irrespective of whether we're in the administration or not, we are going to have to make some difficult decisions going forward about where we spend our finances. But I suppose the question that I have is for Caris, because Caris is the Wales Treasurer. She's the lead Wales Treasurer in looking at the overspend in Wales on social services. So I'd just be asking for a couple of reflections, please. And how do we fare in that table? Are we in a unique position here in Bridgend? Or actually, is this across 22 local authorities? And is there an overspend in adults and in children's? Thanks very much, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Caris, please.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's very relevant, isn't it, really? You're right that there is concern across Wales about social services spending. We've recently, as a Society of Welsh Treasurers, done a survey in relation to spend across social care, and it's showing pressures across both children's and adult services. And I have to say, all authorities are reporting those pressures, some more so than others, but some are reporting significant predicted outturn pressures in this financial year. We wouldn't, as a society, normally survey this early in the year because it is quite early for us to be looking at year-end positions. But I think the financial pressures in social care are coming through everywhere now. So we have done a bit of a rain check, which confirms that, and we will be updating those figures again in the autumn. And just to confirm, those overspends are actually across children's services and adult services in many local authorities at the moment.
Thank you for that update, Carys. Councillor Spanzik wants to come back in, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. Then, is there any analysis of the percentage of the net budget where we lie in Bridgend with the projected overspend compared to as a percentage of our budget compared to other authorities in Wales? So, are we projecting more, or are we all authorities across Wales roughly projecting the percentage that we are projecting?
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik. Carys, please.
I'm assuming that question is in relation to social services, and actually some of the overspends are about 5%, but some authorities are actually predicting up to 20% overspend in some areas of their service, in some of the areas of social care. And it's not consistent. In some, it's more in their adult services than in their children's services, but all are showing a percentage increase on their budget this year.
Thank you for that, Carys. Councillor Spanzik. I have some questions. So first of all, on the learner support budget, we know that there's challenges around out-of-county placements due to an increase in demand and insufficient spaces at Heronsbridge and Ysgol Bryn Castle. I know we're undertaking a review of the capacity at Ysgol Bryn Castle, and I wanted to ask the Head of Education and Family Support for an update on that review, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. We're very conscious of the fact that we have seen an increase in those out-of-authority placements. You will be aware that we have commissioned a replacement for Heronsbridge Special School, and that will have around about 40 additional places and 4 additional residential beds. So hopefully that will take some pressure off our out-of-authority placements. And you're quite right, as there is no sort of statutory capacity calculation for special schools, we've undertaken to partner to get an independent assessment of the correct use of all the spaces within that school to make sure that we're maximising the use of the space wherever we can.
Thank you for that, Nicola. And I'm sure we will include in that review and link up with our alternative provision, which is on the same campus, part of the same building, and we know that both YBC and the Bridge will quite often support the same children and young people. They're not always the same, but quite often provision will be supporting similar children. My next question is for the Chief Legal Officer, and that is about the projected overspend in legal, democratic and regulatory services. And I can see that this is in part due to senior counsel's advice. It'd be helpful if you provided some additional detail about that, please, Kelly.
Thank you, Leader. As you're aware, the demands in children's social services is reflected throughout the organisation, and this particular overspend is directly linked to childcare cases we're taking through the court process. The fees for each application are now in excess of £2,000, and then in addition, the cases are becoming more complex, which requires the authority to instruct senior counsel to attend sometimes very lengthy court hearings. In addition, the fees for experts are going up, and as it's the local authority application, the court feels that we should cover any shortfall between the legal aid fees that are permitted and the actual cost of the expert.
Thank you for that explanation. Now turning to the area where we have by far the biggest projected overspend, and that is social services and the Wellbeing Directorate. I noticed on the mental health home care, and indeed in some of the other areas of expenditure for adults, there is a contribution from our partners, Cwmtaf Morgannwg University Health Board, as quite often these people that we are supporting have health needs as well as social care needs. Can you confirm that we are maximising the contributions that are being made by our partners? As quite often these are statutory responsibilities. It is not always easy, is it, to separate and identify how big the health component is and how big the social care component is, and that can be contested. But of course, we will always look to ensure that is fair, because there is a cost. So that's my first question, and then generally, I do think we're going to have to consider and explore urgently the fees and charges that are set. I know there is significant limitations because of the legislation and regulations we have, but there's sometimes scope to consider that, and that is simply a reflection of the cost of these services, which of course have risen significantly because of, for example, the increases in the real living wage. So that does reflect the costs of these services to the individual. Claire, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, for the questions. I think in terms of mental health services, the assurance that I would give it around the work with the Health Board is that we've got a well-established arrangement for individuals who've got health and social care needs as determined by Section 117 of the Mental Health Act. There is an ongoing need for public services to provide aftercare for those individuals, and we have got an arrangement with Cwmtaf Morgannwg Health Board that we pay 50-50 of those, and I think that's both good from a budget perspective but also from an individual perspective, that the two organisations aren't arguing over who picks up the cost of care, that should be seamless from the individual's perspective. I would say that in other areas of the budget that the work with Health Board can be a bit more contested. It is a contested area of public policy. I think Cabinet will be aware of continuing healthcare has been a contested area of public policy for many years, and frontline workforce work incredibly hard to be very person-centred, but to make sure that the legislation and the guidance around continuing healthcare for both adults and children is adhered to. But it is a challenging area because I think there's well publicised in the public domain issues and challenges with NHS budgets as well as with local authority budgets. So it is a very close focus around. In terms of the second question around charging for individuals, Leader, as you referred to, this is a very regulated area in terms of public policy in Wales, in that Welsh Government sets caps, doesn't it, in terms of the amount that individuals can be charged if they're in receipt of care in the community, and there are also caps then for individuals in residential care, that if their individual capital and income fall below a certain level, then that becomes the responsibility of the local authority. We did consider this last year when a budget was presented to council, and that included a 10% uplift in terms of the individual rates within those caps that individuals were charged. But obviously, given the sort of rates of inflation, the ongoing pressures in terms of services, that will be something where we will bring forward further recommendations. But I must caveat that once an individual reaches that cap, even if we've maximised the charge, the individual hourly charge is beneath that they can't individually pay more than what that cap is.
Okay, thank you for that, and look forward to the outcome of that work. I think it is also worthy of reference, that it's not all overspend on social services. There are some small number of underspends, and what we want to do is maximise those underspends. So there is an underspend on mental health residential care, and that is as a result of alternative solutions being provided to those people that are better for the people we're supporting. Can you reassure us that we'll accelerate that work? If we need to provide additional resource to that, we provide additional resource, because if it can save finances and provide better outcomes for people with mental health challenges, and I'm sure all cabinet members and all members would support that work. And then as it's related, in terms of overspends and underspends, I can see in particular the overspend on independent residential care for children. We of course have invested in the new provision at Bryn Menyn. We look forward to that opening and being able to support children, but that alone, whilst it's a multi-million pound development, it is not going to provide enough spaces for all our children out of county. We're not going to be able to bring all of our children from out of county, but I certainly think our aspiration should be to bring more children from out of county into county, because that will, again, potentially help with our budget, but more importantly, we want our children and young people to be closer to their homes, closer to their communities, where it's right and appropriate for them. So if we could have an update on the development of Bryn Menyn, and also confirmation that we are considering other options as well to urgently increase our provision of residential support within the county borough for children and young people. Claire, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. Just firstly, in terms of the mental health and strength-based working, I absolutely can give that assurance. You know, that people who are in receipt of care and support want to live as independent as possible lives, and you know there's been great success in this authority in terms of supporting people to live as independently as possible, including in our mental health services, and we will continue to do that. We've recently launched our strength-based outcomes focused model of practice in adult services, and that's all about supporting people to live as independently as possible and minimising the need for care and support. In terms of our children's residential provision, good news, after we spoke this morning, Leader, I got an update, and we're very close to handover this week in terms of the building, from the contractors into the authority and into children's services. So we're working towards then a registration process. I won't put an exact date on that because that's outside of the control of the authority, but I can assure that there's been good engagement with the inspectorate throughout the development of the service. So I'm hoping that that can be done in a very timely way. In the same time, we've been recruiting staff. A manager has been recruited in for that provision, and we're actively recruiting staff at the moment to make sure that we can safely build up the provision. So there's assessment beds, and there's slightly longer term beds within that provision. And the aim is for our children and young people that any child who appears to be needing residential provision will have a full assessment of their needs in that service prior to going on to a long-term residential service, with the aim that we step down from residential the majority of those children, and obviously we continue all the efforts to recruit foster carers in the county borough, and we're benefiting over the next couple of years from some of the Welsh Government's allocation around eliminating profit, which is enabling us to put in place far more therapeutic support for our foster carers and our children in residential, all with the aim of de-escalating the need for residential placements, which is in the best interest for the child, but also in the best interest of the budget. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Claire. I can see the Deputy Leader wants to come in. Deputy Leader, please.
Claire said most of what I was going to say, Leader, but it was about our foster carers. The best placement for our children in the county borough is in a family unit. We have much better outcomes for them. So whilst the residential unit is all great and quite right and proper that we should have that, the reality is for most of our children who need residential placement, or they need support care, you know, whatever that means, if they've got it in a family where they feel wanted and loved, they will have much better outcomes going on in later years rather than in a children's home, whether that's just an individual or not. If they've got the support of a family around them, that makes an immense amount of difference to them. So I think that's my plea again in Cabinet. If you know anybody that wants to foster, is considering it, please direct them to our website where they can get more and more information. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. And finally, I wanted to echo the point that Councillor Spanzik has made. We do have to now consider very, very carefully, more carefully, because I'd like to think we've always been careful about how we spend money within this authority, but we've got to be even more careful now about how we spend it, because there is a limit. There is obviously a limit, and we do not want to reach that limit. So it's incumbent upon all officers to discharge that duty, as it is members, of course. We will be convening a task and finish group that specifically looks at the financial pressures and challenges within social services, and to try to provide some additional support to that service in its ongoing journey of remodelling and managing within the financial constraints that we are facing. The recommendation has been moved and it has been seconded. Is everyone in support of the recommendation? So we note the projected revenue position and approve the environments. Thank you, colleagues. The next report, the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, is an update on our capital programme, Q1 of this financial year. Carys, please.
Thank you, Leader. As you said, the main purpose of this report is to provide you with an update on the capital programme position for the current year as at the end of June, and also to note the projected prudential and other indicators for this financial year. On the 1st of March 2023, Council approved a capital budget of £69 million for this financial year as part of the capital programme covering the period 2023-2024 through to 2032-2033. Since March, the programme has changed and now totals £96.9 million. Most of the increase in the programme is the result of slippage from the last financial year into this one. And Table 1 of your report details for you how the capital programme is split between the different directorates in the Council. The programme will be funded by £60.5 million of Bridgend County Borough Council resources. This will include the use of capital receipts, the use of earmarked reserves, and, if necessary, borrowing. The remainder of the programme will be funded from external resources, including some of the general capital grant that we get from Welsh Government. The detail of the funding of the programme is shown for you in Table 2 of this afternoon's report. In Appendix 1, the individual schemes making up the programme are detailed for you, and the key changes reported in this report are detailed at paragraph 315 of this report. When the programme was approved by Council back in March, prudential indicators were included to provide an overview of the details of these for the current year are shown in Appendix C. I can confirm that the Council is operating in line with those approved indicators. So if I may, Leader, I would just take you to Section 9 of the report, where it's recommended that Cabinet notes the capital programme at the Q1 update as at the 30th of June and agrees the revised capital programme at Appendix B be submitted to Council for approval, and also that Cabinet notes the projected prudential and other indicators for the current financial year. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Carys. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And first of all, I'd like to move the recommendation at 9. But before I do that, I suppose I would like to first of all welcome the new report template that we've got. And that there's item number 6. It alerts us to any climate change implications, and then item 8, any financial implications. And 3.2 1.5, that details the sort of the changes then to the immediate changes. There's a number of grants that we get from Welsh Government. Obviously, I'm very welcome for Welsh Government grants, but I just question myself sometimes, are there any genuine revenue implications for accepting the Welsh Government grants? And I don't know, the free school meals, will that be a revenue implication for us that we need to be aware of going forward? The additional classrooms, will that have an implication on the climate change? And the fleet vehicles, I'm just going to refer back to what Councillor Spanswick said earlier, like we really do need to be questioning our spend. And, do we really need to be, changing these vehicles at this moment in time when obviously our finances are under extreme pressure? So I just want directors to have a mind, I suppose, that of those of my thoughts going forward. So are there generally any climate change implications from the changes, and are there any revenue implications? Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. I will bring Carys in, please.
I think they're both very good questions, and I would suggest that as we're drafting this report in the future, we need to make sure that we pick those issues up. In particular, the revenue ones that you're talking about. For many of the schemes, possibly not any revenue consequences, but there will be for some. So you've picked up on the fleet one, Councillor Williams, which is about buying new fleet. Obviously, there will be running costs for that fleet, but I'm assuming most of the fleet being bought is just replacing old. So hopefully running costs would actually reduce. But there will be a hit on the revenue account because that's funded via borrowing, and therefore services do need to make sure before they purchase that fleet that they can actually afford to repay the loans that we will have to take out in order to fund that. I'd suggest, Councillor Williams, that actually we make some of those consequences more explicit as we go through right in the future reports.
Thank you for that, Carys. And I also welcome the new format of the report. It is making the report more informative. I can see the Deputy Leader is next, please.
Thanks, Leader. I'm happy to second the report firstly. I suppose for me, we keep talking about money and the way we can save some money by doing things slightly differently. I wonder if Claire could assist in the DFG, which is the Cwmtaf Morgannwg have awarded the council. I see mine's rubbish. What's 1.1 million? 0.1 million from their Housing with Care fund. But that's about provision at home, so it's keeping people out of residential care. So I'd like a bit further explanation of that, and also in relation to the fleet vehicles and the anticipation that a budget in the region of £460,000 will be required. Will we get any warranty on any of that equipment or vehicles, or how old are they going to be? What does that look like? Because if we're going to have to, whoever's going to do the waste contract, we do need the equipment, but I would like to understand a bit further, please. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Claire, and then I will bring in Janine, please.
Thanks very much, Leader. I think Martin may well want to come in on the DFG specifically, but from a social services perspective, obviously keeping people as independent as possible at home is really our strategy for over many years, and disabled facilities grants help people to do that and remain in their own homes, and actually can reduce the need for ongoing care if people are able to safely manoeuvre around their own homes without carer support. So really the two services go hand in glove in supporting our most vulnerable and people with disabilities to remain as independent as possible. But I'm sure Martin wants to follow up on that.
Thank you for that, Claire. Martin, please.
Thank you, Deputy, for the question. In terms of the £100,000 has been awarded and has been improved, this is with regards values over £36,000. Obviously, there's a restriction in terms of the top value in terms of DFGs of 36,000, which is legislated. and it just gives us an opportunity, as we've seen with rising costs, etc., to go over and above in terms of that £36,000. So we've seen rising costs of the materials, etc. So that's going to support any extension that will go over 36,000. So we'll map it. So there's £100,000 been awarded and gratefully accepted. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Martin. Then I'll bring in Janine next, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader. Thank you for that. For the purposes of the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director for Communities. I think the Deputy Leader, has referred to the 460,000 capital allocation that's in there to purchase waste fleet at the end of Kia's contract, which is the end 31st of March next year. What we have done, Leader, is we've looked at the residual value of all of the vehicles and all of the kit that Kia currently operate. I think I've got a table in front of me. It's over 34 vehicles themselves, including refuse collection vehicles, including recycling vehicles. I've got 5 ton, 7.5 ton bulky waste vehicles, etc. Plus there is a whole mixture of kit such as balers and roll-on, roll-off vehicles which are used to move the skips down in the civic recycling centres. So what we have done is we've looked at what the residual value is of that kit, because we couldn't continue a waste contract post March without it. And the value we've got is the 460,000. Now, the point I think Councillor Gerbie, the Deputy, was making is it warranted? Well, where there are manufacturer warranties remaining, yes, we will take possession of those. But some of these vehicles have been used for 7 years. Their life expectancy is 10 years. So there is some life left in these vehicles. However, we are conscious that they are vehicles that have been used in this existing contract. But to procure them for 460,000 Leader is a very good value for money, because to procure them from brand new would be over 1.5 million. And of course, we don't have the lead-in time to be able to do that. So hopefully that answers and reassures the Deputy Leader.
Thank you for that, Janine. I'm sure it does reassure the Deputy Leader. Councillor Farr is next, and then Councillor Spans. Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader. Just wanted to ask a question on page 44, 3.1.5 on community focused schools. Just wondering, what are these 22 schemes that we're rolling out, please?
Nicola, our Head of Education and Family Support, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Farr. Yeah, I can provide members with the full and complete list, but just to let you know that they are adaptations that allow the community to access the school outside of the school hours, but also enhance the school. So they're things like floodlights, changing rooms, pathways, fencing, things that will enable the community to use the school more broadly than they currently are being used out of hours.
That's very much welcome investment in our schools and in our communities, and we're very grateful to Welsh Government for that investment of nearly £2.4 million. And of course, we will share details of those individual projects in due course. I know we've worked very closely, Nicola, with our schools on these projects. So these are bids that have been made following in-depth discussion with our schools. They've identified potential need, and we've secured that funding from Welsh Government. Councillor Spanzik is next, please.
Thank you, Leader. If I can, just like to expand a bit more on the item on fleet vehicles, which shows £1 million capital, but it's £500,000 this year and £500,000 next year. But my understanding is not additional money, because that is to fund the vehicles as a purchase, and then different departments already have the revenue contributions to cover the costs. But my concern is about the future and making sure we only buy in exactly what we need when we need it, and looking at every penny, which was touched on earlier. I've seen examples in the past where maybe we haven't perhaps spent things the best way we should have on some vehicles, machinery perhaps. And I'd like to have a more in-depth look at this, not just the purchases of the plant machinery and vehicles, but also the operation of the fleet services that we run, which from the revenue budget point of view, that's been overspending that's been struggling. There's been a review ongoing for a while, and I think we now need to have the report and the briefing paper on the whole fleet operation, both from how it operates and what we purchase, and to have some real deep dive into the vehicles and what we're buying, because that will have an impact on the net zero as well on some vehicles. And we can't just keep vehicles going around forever, because it'll cost more. If we keep old vehicles going, that'll cost more than replacing. But now, more than ever, we have to look seriously at every little item that's been purchased across all directorates to make sure that we're buying vehicles and they're not sat there, say, in day centres or depots sitting idle for the majority of the time and not being used. Because if that's the case, we don't need them.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik. Janine, please, Corporate Director, Communities.
Oh, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Councillor Spanzik. And that's something that's a key part of our fleet review. We are starting with the highest mileage vehicles, and we're looking at whether we can replace them, where they're used, and also whether we can share vehicles between services. That's critical too. We don't want to have vehicles sitting idle. We don't have the ability or the resource to be able to do that anymore. Another important thing is only replacing vehicles when they're at the end of their usable life. I know we have a drive, as we've discussed, and as Councillor Williams has mentioned, about ultra-low emission vehicles in 2030, but we have to be, with a very challenging financial position, we have to be very prudent in the money that we spend. That's critical, really. So I would be more than pleased to bring that review here for you for Cabinet, so we can have an informed discussion on it going forward, because the one thing we must ensure now is that we have the right amount of fleet and it's fit for purpose and used effectively. Thank you.
Also welcome that review coming back, and we will have to be forensic, like in our focus on fleet, because of the carbon footprint, and even with ultra low electric vehicles, there's obviously a resource implication, isn't there? There's a natural resource implication from the construction of those vehicles, and that is why we want to sweat the assets we already have to the maximum until the very end of their useful life. That's better actually for the environment, isn't it? Whilst of course when we do need to replace the fleet, look at the options that are best for the environment as well. I'll now bring in the Cabinet Member for Education, please, Councillor Blundell.
Thank you, Leader. Just to really point out two really important bits of investment on page 44 with the kitchen pods and the extension to kitchens at Trelaws Primary that we're building to help with our rollout of the universal provision of free school meals, and also the extra funding we've got from the Welsh Government for expand Flying Start, especially in Ogwen Vale and Pontycymer, which I know they're very much welcome and very excited to get those provisions in place. So just two bits there, really good news that I think really should be celebrated, and that we are moving forward with our expansion of free school meals and Flying Start into County Borough. Thank you.
It is excellent news, and again, we're very grateful to Welsh Government for fully funding that investment to enable those services to expand. I can't see that anyone else wants to come in on this report. The only other aspect of the report that I know will be of interest to the public and the members is the proposal to boost the Community Asset Transfer Fund with a reallocation of budgets. We know how successful that fund has been in supporting projects in our community, so I hope that will be supported in full council tomorrow, along with the other proposals. So recommendations to be moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please? Thank you, colleagues. We will now move on to the third report of the Chief Officer of Finance, Performance and Change, and that is on our Treasury management and the first quarter of this year. Caris, please.
Many thanks, Leader. As you said, the purpose of this report is to report to you on our activity with regards to Treasury Management for the period up to the end of June this year. As you know, Treasury Management is the management of our cash flows, borrowing and investments, and also the managing of the risk associated with those activities. So the Treasury Management strategy for the current financial year was approved by Council on the 1st of March. As you'll see in the report, the economic climate continues to impact on the financial markets, and this is detailed for you, as I said in the report. Appendix A gives more details with regards to our activities for the first quarter. In summary, the Council has £99 million of long-term debt. There's been very little change in that level over the past 3 months, with just a small amount of our Salix loan having been repaid in that period. At the moment, it's not anticipated that we will need to borrow in the current financial year. As at the end of June, the Council also had £94 million of investments. This is an increase since the end of March, which is mainly due to a double instalment of Welsh Government funding that we received in April this year, which is normal. The average interest rates being earned by our investments has gone up in the first quarter of this year. So the average interest rate now is at 4.16%, which is up from 2.55% at the end of March, which is obviously reflecting the changes that we've seen in the interest rates in recent months. So our investments have currently earned us £917,000 over that 3-month period. I would stress that's good news because the money that we have is working harder for us. Obviously, should we have to borrow, there would be additional costs associated with that due to the increased base rate that we now have. So I can confirm that the Council has operated within the agreed Treasury Management policy throughout this first 3-month period of the year. So if I may, Leader, I would just take you to the recommendations at section 9 of this afternoon's report, where it's recommended that Cabinet notes the Treasury Management activities for the period April to June this year, and also notes the Treasury Management indicators for that same period against those approved in the strategy for this current financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Caris. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Caris, again for the report. I think it's more important than ever that the authority maxes its return on available finance in the short term, and maybe just a brief explanation from Caris, because I do note that our investments have increased by is it 24 million from this year to last year? So I just understanding maybe for others how that increase has come about.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Caris, please.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. They have increased since the end of March. The main reason for that is, as usual, Welsh Government pays us two payments of the grants that were due during the year, and we get 2 payments in April, which means that we've had more money in at the start of the year than we've actually needed to spend over that period. Therefore, our investments have gone up. That's normal, and we reflect that position in most financial years.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Leader. Happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams and Caris. Deputy Leader, please, is next.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you very much, Caris. So just to clarify, because there's been a lot of furore over the press about people's interest rates on their savings, are you saying to us that we have immediate change in our investments is the first thing I want to ask. And what difference does that actually make to us, please? And I'm happy to second the report, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Caris, please.
No, thank you very much for the question. Our investment rates tend to move with the bank rate fairly swiftly, certainly more swiftly than you or I would see on our savings accounts, that's for sure. But there will be a slight lag. Just to stress that those investments that we currently have, the investment rate is agreed at the time in which we place that money and is fixed for the duration of that investment period. Therefore, what we're starting to see is as the rates are going up, we are now getting an improved return on them. So our previous investment rate in March was about 4.7%. So we are seeing an improvement with the interest rates we're getting now coming up to 4 and over 4%, which is certainly an improvement in what we were getting in March. So there is a bit of a time lag, Deputy Leader, but it's certainly not as great as we get if we've got savings at home. And just a reminder that once that money is fixed, the interest rate will not change for the duration of that investment.
Thank you for that explanation. So the recommendation's been moved. I've had a seconder from the Deputy. Did you second it, Deputy Leader?
I did indeed, Leader. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Deputy Leader. Is everyone in agreement with the recommendations, please? Thank you, colleagues. We will now move on to a report of the Chief Executive, and that is on the Corporate Plan Delivery Plan 2023 to 2024 and the Performance Framework. Over to you, please, Mark.
Thank you, Leader. In fact, this is going to be a bit of a double act between myself. I'm going to give you some introduction, some context, and then I'm going to hand you over to Alex Rawlin, our Policy and Performance Manager. I'll provide some of the detail. Briefly, in terms of background, as you say, this is the report to propose a one-year corporate plan delivery plan to support the Council's new corporate plan and also an updated corporate performance framework to help the Council measure our progress on it. You'll recall that both Cabinet and Council agreed the new corporate plan for 2023 to 28 over the last few months. That included 7 new wellbeing objectives and 5 new ways of working. But in a departure from the way that we previously presented corporate plans, we also agreed that annually we'd provide this additional plan, which would set out specifically what we will do and how we will measure it on a year-by-year basis, which I think is a useful and helpful departure, really, so that we can be more particular and specific. The plan that's here for your approval today, and indeed will go to Council tomorrow, has gone through a lot of engagement and consultation. The final plan that's here reflects the feedback that we've had from all of those sources, most recently the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee last week. So there have been some tweaks following that meeting. What I would say finally before I hand to Alex, this is of course an evolving process. We've tried to pick up some of the criticisms that we had from Audit Wales about our performance framework. We've also tried to pick up some of the lessons from the original self-assessment work that we did last year. What I would say to you is that inevitably, as this process evolves, no doubt there'll be further improvements as we work through it and as we find out ourselves what works and what doesn't work as part of this process. But Alex, if you want to pick it up from there and go through some of the specifics.
Thank you for that, Mark. Alex, please.
Yeah, Alex Rawlin, Policy and Performance Manager. Cabinet, scrutiny members and all other members have been involved in the development of the Corporate Plan Delivery Plan since we came up with the idea of doing it. We all agreed it was sensible to move to an annual delivery plan, even though it has pushed things a bit later in the year than we might have liked. We went through the development process, areas for improvement and things we still needed to do at an all-member development session last month. And since then, we've spent some time with Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee to continue to make improvements. And with them, we've been particularly looking at our progress on moving towards an objectives and key results approach as requested by COSC in terms of the aims, commitments and PIs and the way we report performance using a heat map. Improvements to performance management that we've made to address last year's honest appraisal in the self-assessment, Audit Wales's review of performance management and a more recent performance indicator audit by internal audit. Since that session, we've filled most of the gaps and put everything together in one place. I think we all believe this is a better set of information to inform your decision making, and it will genuinely give you a comprehensive view of our progress against the corporate plan. So the main improvements since previous years are developing clear aims under each wellbeing objective, a split of projects or commitments and business as usual PIs, both of which will help us achieve the aims and demonstrate how we're doing so.
more outcome-focused indicators, indicators that can be compared over time and with others, and PIs and commitments for our ways of working as well as for our wellbeing objectives. We've discussed with both Audit Wales and with Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee our approach to using public views and things the public cares about to inform our decision making. I think we've all agreed that we're still not as good as we could be at that, and at that member session I asked COSC whether they'd support my team in doing some work over the coming year to develop a stronger focus on that area, especially looking at survey and satisfaction measures, customer service and responsiveness measures, and national survey measures. They agreed to do that, and the graduates in my team have started the background work, so we will give you an update on that later in the year. Then moving just really quickly onto the performance framework. Developing a clear and agreed performance framework is an important part of the Performance Management Improvement Plan, and addresses many of the issues from last year's and this year's self-assessment, the Audit Wales review, and the PI audit done by Internal Audit. The draft that you have in front of you is based on a combination of our own old performance framework for that sense of continuity and familiarity, but also uses Denbighshire's framework that we found really helpful and a lot more focused on roles and responsibilities of different people and groups within the council. So that report sets out why performance is important, how it's managed in BCBC, clarity about the blue, red, amber, yellow, green ratings, a timetable of performance management, and some clear roles and responsibilities in performance management, both for members and for officers. We hope that's a really useful document that clarifies some things that have been unclear and helpfully outlines the roles and responsibilities of everyone, as well as the relationships and interdependencies between them. And we intend to communicate this across the organisation over coming months.
Thank you for that, Alex, and thank you to you and your small team for the work you've undertaken on this report, and thank you to all members of the authority that have engaged fully in the development of this plan and this framework. It's been a very inclusive process, and I know their input has been reflected in the first draft that we have before us and the updated corporate performance framework. I can see that Councillor Williams wants to come in, so I'll bring him in first, then Councillor Good, then Councillor Spanzer. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And I'm just wondering if officers could update us, I suppose, on what progress we have made with performance management in response to the Wales audit findings earlier this year. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Williams. Who is going to take that? Is that Alex, please? Alex, thank you.
Yeah, obviously lots of these are in the corporate plan, delivery plan. That's been developed to address some of those criticisms. So, for example, that wellbeing objectives aren't fully measured by the existing commitments and PIs. We've got much better coverage now. We've also clarified aims under each wellbeing objective and decoupled those commitments and PIs that Audit Wales weren't very keen on. We've got a better focus on output and outcome measures and things that we can compare over time and with others. And of course, we've got that new performance framework updated, which was another one of their criticisms, that the old one was out of date and hadn't been updated for a while. A few other things that have happened outside the corporate plan delivery plan. CPA now considers additional information about staffing and finances in the quarterly dashboards. We've now got a regulatory tracker, which is considered by Governance and Audit Committee half yearly and included in those corporate dashboards, quarterly dashboards. We've got some planned training for all performance-related staff across the organisation and a corporate plan session for all staff in September. We've got corporate plan and performance management in staff and manager inductions, data quality and accuracy forms for each PI to address some of those criticisms of data quality. We've worked with Internal Audit to start developing a process for some mini PI audits in 2024. We've taken steps to find a permanent home for the performance team, and we've appointed to all the vacant posts bar one, which hopefully will be soon.
Right. thank you for that update.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Next is Councillor Good, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Alex, for taking us through the report. I'd also like to move the report because I don't believe that has happened yet. I just wanted to quickly look at the ways of working, which I think are really positive. But it'd be good to know, perhaps from the Chief Exec, what is being done to make sure that we aren't just as CMB and members of Cabinet talking about this, but this is something that is deeply understood by all levels within the authority, and that we are driving through that understanding and engagement with the corporate plan so that people can see why KPIs exist and why we are doing this, and to make sure that they really buy into it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Good. Chief Executive, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I think it's a very valid question. Once this is approved, what Alex and I envisaged a whole programme really of staff engagement to, if you like, make it much more real. So starting with a number of staff briefings that are arranged in September, but also be regular communication about the plan, and I suppose making it relevant to everyone's work. I think part of the challenge is for everyone to feel that the objectives that have been set and the ways of working are relevant to them, whatever job they do. So I think we are aware that a lot of what you've described really is cultural. So it's a cultural piece around how does everyone feel that they are, if you like, part of a cog working in the same direction, part of how we achieve strong performance across the authority. And I think that'll be an element of briefing, an element of training, but an element of communication and ongoing engagement around the plan, so it feels very relevant to them. It's not something that's just produced once a year in this forum, but it's actually something that is used and cascaded through directorates as part of the Directorate Business Planning as well.
Thank you for that, Mark. And next we have Councillor Spanzik, please.
Thank you, Leader. And mine more or less follows on from that, because that was my sort of question is how we're getting this across, because we tend to produce lots of documents, we do as an authority, and they focus on people based in offices. We have a lot of staff out there working on streets and depots, out in communities, and not just performance management, but also the business plans, and that's it's not something that perhaps they want to know about, but need to understand where they fit in that bigger picture. And I'd like to see a lot more work in whether that's toolbox talks or what, to really see how that individual working out there can affect quite drastically somebody was saying or doing the wrong thing, how that affects, sort of the reputation of the authority as well on occasions, not doing purpose, but they can say the wrong thing and it reflects bad. But we just need, I think, better engage with the staff on that very crucial operational day-to-day level out there, not just in the offices, but also in the offices as well. But there's a lot of engagement out there that needs to be done.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik, and I'm sure that's a task that is underway. It's a big task, isn't it? But we do want to ensure that all members of the staff of the authority understand how they contribute to the aims and priorities of the organisation, and certainly it's now centre stage in the presentation that myself and the Chief Executive give to all staffers in the authority, whether that's a care worker, whether that's a teacher, whether that's a highway worker or a social worker. They are invited, expected to be part of that induction session. Deputy Leader is next, please.
Thanks, Leader. Thanks very much for the report, Alex and Claire. Alex, you've been very specific about our PIs, but I understand that COSC wanted you to proceed slightly differently with this plan and our performance indicators. Could you give me an explanation as to why we've not gone down that road, please?
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Alex, please.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we have gone some way down that road. We just haven't gone all the way down that road. I think we decided it was a pretty big change, one that we're not really clear yet how objectives and key results might work for a local authority with such a broad range of services. And I think we need to give that some more consideration over the coming year. I think we also probably don't really have the capacity or necessarily the expertise in the team to do that. So that's something, again, we need to build over the coming year. And then some other considerations and things, considering things we were thinking about over the year, which were Audit Wales have just told us we need to improve our commitments and PIs to better match our wellbeing objectives. So that's been a key focus. They've also told us to focus on data quality and accuracy. And I think we probably can't necessarily do everything at once. We also want to be able to make comparisons over time and with other authorities. And I think we couldn't do that with a completely new approach, not including KPIs. So we've definitely gone some way towards doing that. The decoupling of the commitments and the PIs has certainly taken us some way there. So you can see how we're achieving our aims more clearly. The heat maps that we intend to produce for each wellbeing objective at the end of each quarter will also contribute towards that objectives and key results approach. So you can see really, really clearly and easily at a glance how we're doing on each wellbeing objective. But yeah, I think it's an evolving approach. That's, I suppose, the good thing about doing this 1 year corporate plan, delivery plan, so that next year we can go further and the year after further than that.
Thank you for that, Alex. The recommendations have been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please? Thank you, colleagues, and thank you very much once again, Alex. So the next report we have is, again, a report to the Chief Finance Officer for Performance and Change, and it is on our Housing Support Programme strategy, draft strategy to 2026, and our Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan and Housing Prospectus. So I will invite Carys to introduce this report, please. Carys.
Thank you, Leader. As you said, the purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet approval to consult on the draft Housing Support Programme strategy, which is attached at Appendix 1, and also to approve the submission of the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan at Appendix 2 and the Housing Prospectus at Appendix 3 to Welsh Government. Firstly, can I just apologise to members for the delay in bringing this strategy forward for consideration? Due to capacity issues in the service, it has been a challenge to complete these papers due to the detailed work required to collect the data and then also to analyse it and bring it forward. So the draft Housing Support Programme strategy has been written following consultation with key stakeholders across Bridgend. This has included agencies who work in this field, as well as individuals who are using or have used homelessness services. And a significant amount of engagement did take place with them to enable us to bring the draft forward. So this work has been done following a period of considerable change in the demand for support for individuals and families who find themselves homeless. As outlined in Appendix A, the Council has seen a significant increase in the numbers of people presenting as homeless, and this level of need is continuing. Applications from single persons account for a significant proportion of all of the applications that we have, and this has increased over the past 4 years. We're also seeing a need to accommodate families as well. So the strategy outlines for you a number of the pressures that the Council and its partners have in addressing this increased level of demand. So the Council has had to increase the use of temporary accommodation significantly over the last 4 years, and at the end of January this year, there were 249 households in temporary accommodation. To meet this demand, the Council is having to make use of accommodation in the tourism sector. The housing available in the private rented sector is limited, as the private rent costs in this area are vastly in excess of the local housing allowance or the universal credit rates. So that limits our ability to place people in the private rented sector. We have also seen a sharp increase in the number of households waiting for accommodation on the Common Housing Register, and this is due to the lack of social housing in the area. So the work that's been done to date identifies the current position and also highlights the key issues that need to be addressed. The proposal is to consult on these findings and the proposed strategy. This consultation will again speak with key stakeholders, including families and individuals who are using the services, but also service providers and registered social landlords. We will also be taking this draft proposal through the scrutiny committee, and also we'll be talking to other services across the council. A final strategy will then be brought forward to Cabinet for approval. Today's papers also include the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, which addresses how the authority plans to reduce its use of temporary accommodation. Bridgend's vision for rapid rehousing is ensuring that homelessness is prevented, and where it cannot be prevented, to reduce the time spent in temporary accommodation, ensuring people access permanent suitable accommodation quickly and with support to live independently. So the plan attached at Appendix 2 highlights that current position in relation to the use of temporary accommodation, but also identifies some actions that can be taken to reduce the use of this type of accommodation as we move forward. And this plan is to be submitted to Welsh Government. Between them, the papers included within this report provide significant detail regarding the current levels of housing needs across Bridgend, the Bridgend Council area, and that this level of need is ongoing. The papers do outline options for how the Council can work with partners to improve the offer that we have for people who are homeless and to reduce the need for temporary accommodation going forward. So if I may, Leader, I would just take you to the recommendations at Section 9 of this afternoon's report, where it's recommended that Cabinet approves a 12-week public consultation on the draft homelessness strategy and action plan. The Cabinet approves the submission of the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan and the Housing Prospectus to Welsh Government. And also the Cabinet notes that the final homelessness strategy and action plan will be presented to Cabinet for approval prior to formal submission to Welsh Government. Thank you.
Thank you, Carys. I can see that Councillor Good, as the Cabinet member, would like to come in. Councillor Good, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Carys, for taking us through the very long and many appendices report. First of all, I'd like to move it. Happy to move the report, and secondly to thank the small but very determined housing team in Bridgend. They've worked very, very hard on getting this to where it is now. I must add, partly because of some bratty responses from the Cabinet member on a few occasions to ask for some changes to be made, but I think we have reached a point where this is a document that I'm pleased to see coming before Cabinet at this point. As Carys has outlined, there is significant pressure on housing and homelessness within Bridgend. We have over 2,500 people on the Common Housing Register. We have over 250 people in temporary accommodation waiting for homes, and 51% of that temporary accommodation currently is in tourist accommodation. And this is an important step forward in finding ways that we can move away from that, because we all know that that isn't something that years ago we would ever have envisaged, something we ever thought would be something we'd have to do, but it is where we are. I know the team is working very hard, along with myself, to look for those different models and different ways of housing people, so that we can move away from that. The 12-week consultation, I really hope, and I have asked the team for a engagement plan on that, so that we can make sure that we are getting the responses that we need to get, those real life experiences reflected, as well as making sure that colleagues in scrutiny committees and across the chamber feel like they've been heard and listened to. And I think that is really important when you consider that we do have to work closely with RSLs to make sure that our needs are reflected, and there are times where perhaps the RSLs could listen more closely to what we require as an authority. As I'm sure colleagues will note, 59% of the people currently on the Common Housing Register are waiting for one-bed properties, and they simply don't exist in Bridgend. Carys mentioned the limitations of private rented. It's not just the cost within Bridgend, but I think last month, if you searched online for private rented accommodation in Bridgend, there were only 44 properties, which is nowhere near the housing that we require. So we do have to work very closely with our RSL partners, but they equally need to be making sure that when they are looking at this, that they are looking at how they do and create housing that's sustainable, that meets the needs of our borough, not just the needs that they find perhaps with their board members. It is becoming increasingly evident to me that they need to consider that more. But I'd leave it there. I hope all members listening to this or watching this meeting engage in the consultation. I hope you encourage your residents out there as well to engage in that, because it is really important that we get as wide a snapshot as we can to make sure that we can create a strategy that lasts and is robust for the next 5 years. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Good, and I'd certainly echo the appreciation to the very small team, because it's the same small team that are dealing on a daily basis with the presentations that we're receiving on a daily basis from people who are homeless and are in desperate need of our help. I can see that the Deputy Leader wants to come in, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you very much for the report. I am encouraged by it. I think it's worth drawing members' attention to the stakeholders' views. And a number of stakeholders spoke very highly of the amount and variety of supported accommodation available within the borough, but that we needed more options available. I think one of the options that I think I need to highlight, considering my portfolio, is our looked after children and the position that they find themselves in when moving on. And I think the other thing that I'd like to highlight is that a lot of the demand for our complex housing needs, so there's a care and support element that is required from this as well. And that is a further pressure on budgets, Leader. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader, and thank you for highlighting the level of engagement that has taken place in a very structured way, and that engagement has taken the form of structured interviews with key partners. So it's not just please complete an online survey, and clearly that can quite often deliver much more insight and a much more useful picture that we're painting. And I think I want to reference the fact that certainly the way that we work on a multi-agency basis through the homeless cell meetings and the multi-agency approach has been adapted by us through our assertive outreach service alongside the health board. Let's give some credit where credit's due, and their outreach team has been described as a gold standard of the work that we do with rough sleepers. That's included in the report. Of course there's more to do, but that partnership approach is crucial. I wanted to make the point around the very stark statistics that we have in the document, and that is that we currently have 2,629 households on the Common Housing Register. That in 2016 we had 981. That is a huge leap. That's a 205% increase. And I think last year a total of over 450 properties were let. So the reality is that most of those people are going to be waiting on that housing register for at least a year, and at the current rate of construction of new homes, that waiting time isn't going to get shorter, it is going to get longer, and it could be into years for a number of people. And I know that is part of the difficult and hard conversations we often have to have with people about the reality and likelihood of them securing permanent accommodation through the Common Housing Register. I can see that the DEP wants to come back in before I make some further points and ask any more questions. Deputy Leader.
Thanks, Leader. I suppose I'm looking for some reassurance, really, that the population needs assessment is being taken seriously by our registered social landlords, because that identifies what we need going forward, and it also ensures that we deliver flexible support services. But we can't do that without the support of our partner agencies, is what I want to say. So I'd like to be so I'm seeking some reassurance, and it's about, because it's very resource intensive, and this shouldn't just be reliant on local government officers.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Martin, please.
Thank you, Leader. I think that's a key component, Deputy, in terms of we can't do this on our own, and some of the struggles we have at the moment. So we're engaging with all our partners from an RSL perspective and the private rental sector, because this is a joint effort. There's nothing more that we want to do in housing is to provide safe, secure tenancies for persons who are in need. But that's where we are. We set up regular engagement meetings in terms of our RSLs, both at an operational level with our partners, as well as sort of a higher level where we'll be putting pressure on them in terms of our needs and the population assessment driven from the prospectus, albeit as a point in time in terms of where we are. But it's very evident from everything, and what the leaders just mentioned, it's only growing in terms of the challenges. So it's key that we can identify the right accommodation as well around accessibility, and then facilitating that community cohesion element. It's not just about presenting multiple single bed units to facilitate the CHR, but it's just to support growing communities as well across the borough, north and south.
Thank you for that reassurance that we are considering those wider needs. And also, one other reflection from me is that sometimes there is a picture painted of who is in housing need and who's homeless, and that isn't always the case. So there's actually over 100 applications currently on the Common Housing Register for people who want sheltered accommodation. So it's not always the case that these are young single people who are homeless. We have, unfortunately, a very diverse range of homeless people and people in significant housing need. I would urge our partners, and I know we've had good engagement, we want further engagement with our partners. I know we will tighten up the timescales, because we do need to tighten up the timescales in here, and look at how we can have some harder milestones that we'll be ambitious in achieving those harder milestones as well. But just wanted to take the opportunity, because I'm seeing it now on almost a daily basis, is we are having presentations from people who have become homeless, and unfortunately they haven't contacted us at the earliest opportunity. And what we would say to people is, if you've had an eviction notice, if you've been told by your landlord that you are going to be made homeless, you need to contact us straight away, because we might be able to support you in sustaining your current tenancy. We might be able to, we might not be able to, but we might be able to. But if we don't know about that, we can't provide you with the advice and support that we want to do and start that process if we cannot maintain you in your current tenancy. Because time and time again, we are seeing that people are not coming forward soon enough. So that's a plea I would repeat again, so that we can provide more help to more people at the earliest possible stage. The recommendation's been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please? Thank you, colleagues. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the first report, the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support, and it is on the project Relationship Building Together. And after that report, we will take a short comfort break, but the Head of Education and Family Support will introduce this report first.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is, as you say, to update Cabinet on the Relationships Building Together project, and to outline key milestones prior to seeking formal Cabinet approval in September 2023, once we have received the approval from the Youth Endowment Fund Committee, which we anticipate being in 24th of July. So the Youth Endowment Foundation was established in March 2019 by the children's charity Impetus and received a £200 million endowment and a 10-year mandate from the Home Office. It funds the delivery and evaluation of projects and collaborations across England and Wales to build knowledge about what works in preventing children and young people becoming involved in violence. And one of the ways in which it does this is to provide themed grants. So in September 2022, the Youth Endowment Foundation launched a targeted programme, Trauma-Informed Practice and its Impact on Youth Violence, outlining a particular interest in trauma-informed practice delivered in youth justice, education or children's social care settings. In October 2022, 6 teams within this local authority worked in partnership with the All Wales Forensic Adolescent Consultation Treatment Service, or FACS for short, within the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service to submit a bid to the Youth Endowment Fund to establish the Relationships Building Together project. So these 6 teams within the local authority work with approximately 1,000 children a year, and it's estimated that over 75% of those children have experienced significant trauma, which has impacted on their ability to develop meaningful relationships and leads to problematic behaviours. There are often significant concerns about their safety or that of others. Many of these children fall below the threshold of CAMS, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, and other neurodevelopmental services, meaning that their vulnerabilities do not give them access to services which would help their recovery from the trauma they've experienced. So the Relationship Building Together project will encompass both staff training on using the trauma-informed model and a psychology-led approach, which uses case formulation to better understand a child's life journey, their developmental needs, strengths and protective factors, and it supports practitioners and services to consider what the right intervention is at the right time. On the 2nd of February 2023, Bridgend Local Authority was notified that their bid had been successful and around £800,000 had been secured from the Youth Endowment Foundation. 59 applications had been made across England and Wales, and the Bridgend project is the only successful project in Wales to secure the funding and one of only 3. The Youth Endowment Foundation has provided an example of their general terms and conditions for consideration for members set out in Appendix A. So since February 2023, the project team has been co-designing, working carefully with the evaluation team for the University of Kent to refine and finalise the project and the evaluation to ensure they can work effectively together and produce the most robust project interventions and evaluation evidence. The co-design phase finished in June 2023, and now a joint project and evaluation proposal has been submitted to the Youth Endowment Committee for approval. The proposal will be considered in July, and following their final approval, the grant will be issued and the service level agreement entered into, which begins in September 2023 and ends in March 2025. Once the grant is received, 5 additional posts will be recruited to. These are a clinical psychologist and 4 trauma leads. During the co-design phase, 80 staff across the 6 teams have been identified to take part in the project. 40 staff will be trained in the trauma recovery model. The other 40 will be in the control group. There'll be further advanced training for 10 key staff, which will include the 4 trauma leads and the clinical psychologist. In the life of the project, the evaluation will include working with approximately 800 children across the 6 teams. This includes 400 children who will be in the project and 400 children who will be in the control group. So, as I said, there has been funding secured for this project. It is £787,098. The Youth Endowment Foundation has confirmed the costings and the proposals submitted. The co-design phase has been reliant on some local authority investment of time, and there is a breakdown of finances in Appendix B. There is no match funding requirement, but some funding in kind has been included, mainly through existing staff time. The recommendation of the report is that Cabinet notes the content of the report and provides in principle approval to commence the project in September 2023, subject to finalised terms and conditions outlined in the SLA. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nicola. Councillor Blundell, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. First of all, Nicola, please thank the team and congratulate the team for all their hard work, and obviously securing the only bit of funding in Wales is a remarkable achievement. Just to also say this is a massive collaborative action. You've got 5 or 6 teams there working across this council, not just in the education and family support, but in social services and wellbeing. It is a true one council collaborative approach, this is. And just really the only other thing, 2 things from me. First, I'll move the report before I forget. And obviously we need to keep a monitoring of this. I think probably the best place for this would be corporate parenting, maybe, or corporate parenting committee, and keep a watchful eye on how this is going so we can see the progress of this going forward over the next few years. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell, and I certainly support your suggestion of it being reported to the corporate parenting. This is an innovative pilot project, and we're very excited about it, but we'll have to carefully monitor the outcomes. I'm sure they will be positive, and one of the strengths to this project is, of course, built into it is an assessment and ongoing evaluation by the University of Kent. So we've got that independent, rigorous academic assessment of the project. Councillor Farr's next, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to second the report, and I really welcome this. I think it's about time we had something like this, working with young people who need some kind of therapy. A couple of questions for me. What will happen after the funding runs out? I think it's March 2025. How are we going to measure success? That it is something that we need ongoing, and we're taking new staffing on. What's going to happen to them once the funding has expired? Thank you, Leader, and I second the report.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farr. Nicola, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Farr. Obviously, we hope that within the period of the project, there will be very positive legacy to hand on at the end of it. You know, we are training a lot of our staff. 80 staff will receive some training as part of this. We've had lots of conversations about kind of legacy and what the project leaves. I think what the Youth Endowment Foundation hopes is that the evaluation will show good evidence, and with good evidence they hope to be able to secure further funding. So, you know, the aim would be that if the project is successful, it doesn't end in March 2025, because we've got the evidence to show it works, and therefore it continues. If in the worst case scenario, either the evidence was poor or it didn't show what it was meant to be, or we weren't able to secure, or the Youth Endowment Foundation wasn't able to secure funding alongside that, we have 5 new members of staff, all of whom we would easily be able to assume into our organisation. As you know, we've got a number of vacancies across the organisation. They have the kind of skill set that we would always need within the organisation. So we felt when, you know, we knew obviously there is always a risk with any temporary funding that, you know, you take people on and then you have legacy issues, but we felt that it was very low risk, because we would almost always have vacancies for people of the kind that we're hoping to recruit.
Thank you for that. Councillor Farr, please. Thank you for that, and no doubt we'll carefully consider the future of the project once it's underway, and we see the impact, and I've no doubt that it will have on our most vulnerable young people. Recommendations have been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please, colleagues? Thank you, colleagues. That is everyone. We will now have a short comfort break. So if you can be back here in 3 minutes. No, I'll give you 10 minutes. I will give you 10 minutes. So by my laptop, it is 4:15. So if you can be back here by 4:25 at the very latest, please, and then we will reconvene the meeting. Thank you.